Let's do socialism in America. What's wrong with socialism? There's only one thing wrong with it. It's got to be run by people. As you'll find out in this particular demonstration. It seems to me that Scripture describes in the millennium a socialist government, or something close to that, theocratic socialism. However, it can only work if the one running the government is perfect and benevolent. That's why socialism has always failed, because the people at the top became corrupted or were corrupted from the beginning. Let's start out with Bernie Sanders.
If we are serious about rebuilding the American middle class, if we are serious about reinvigorating American democracy, we need to develop a political movement which once again is prepared to take on and defeat a ruling class whose greed is destroying our nation.
Well, can you hear that all right?
It's a little low.
Okay. That's because I forgot to click the button here. What he's saying there is probably quite true. That's our problem, corruption.
So let me take this opportunity to define for you, simply and straightforwardly, what democratic socialism means to me. It means building on what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said when he fought for guaranteed economic rights for all Americans. And it builds on what Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1968 when he stated, and I quote, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor," end of quote. My view of democratic socialism builds on the success of many other countries around the world who have done a far better job than we have in protecting the needs of their working families, their elderly citizens, their children, their sick, and their poor. Democratic socialism means that we must reform a political system which is corrupt, that we must create an economy that works for all, not just the very wealthy.
Anything wrong with that? Sounds really good, don't you think? Let's go over to Bernie's new press secretary. I'm just having a little trouble getting these videos in order. You'll excuse me. Belen Sisa, who is herself an illegal alien, a dreamer. She's a student in college, and she is the new spokesperson for Bernie Sanders. Watch her.
Democrat lawmakers are now embracing socialism.
Donald Trump
is lying to you about Bernie Sanders and socialism.
They want to replace individual rights with total government domination.
Trump is a coward who hides behind lies and fear because everything he does is a failure. What democratic socialism means to Bernie is having a government which represents all people, not just the very wealthy. Democratic socialism is making sure that all of our people have health care as a right, education as a right, housing as a right, and childcare as a right. That's what Bernie believes. For Bernie, democratic socialism does not mean that government should own the means of production. It means that the middle class, the working families, and the working people who produce America's wealth deserve a fair share of it. These lies have happened before. In 1965, when President Johnson passed Medicare and Medicaid, conservatives like Trump attacked these programs as a socialist threat to our American way of life. These programs provide health care to over 100 million senior citizens and working families, and are far more popular than private insurance. This isn't radical or new. We can look at the example of countries like Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, where working people came together to make sure everyone benefited from the wealth being generated and all people are guaranteed health care, a good education, and the ability to take care of their family. But this isn't just Europe. Both Costa Rica and Colombia guarantee health care to their citizens with almost no copays or deductibles. Both countries' healthcare systems have been ranked higher than the U.S., and even Fox News called healthcare in Costa Rica modern and the state of the art.
And that's why they broke now.
The wealthiest country in the history of the world should not be able to do the same. Donald Trump lies because he doesn't want you to remember he broke all his promises. He said he would bring good health care.
I am going to take care of everybody.
But he tried to throw 32 million people off their insurance. He says he cares about Latin America.
They love me, I love them.
But he is trying to overthrow governments in the region. To orchestrate these regime changes, Trump hired the man who covered up the assassination of Archbishop Romero and lied about the El Mozote massacre in El Salvador that killed 700 civilians. This man also lied about the genocide in Guatemala and supported death squads that committed war crimes in Nicaragua. Donald Trump partners with war criminals, rips babies from their mothers, and puts children in cages. While Trump lies, Bernie asks the important questions, like,
Why do we have grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality? Why are millions of people leaving school deeply in debt? Why do we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Why do we have more people in jail than any other country? Why do women continue to make 79 cents on the dollar? Why aren't we addressing the crisis of climate change?
together we can create a society where everyone has the right to live in security and dignity.
Sounds good. See what's next.
Wow.
This might come as a surprise, but in the history of the modern world, there has never been a communist country. While a number of countries have described themselves as
communist, for example, China and North Korea, by definition, there has never been a true communist country. So, what exactly is communism, and how does it relate to socialism? Well, it may be easier to explain what the two have in common. Both ideologies originate from a desire to limit worker exploitation and lower or eliminate the influence of economic classes in society. There are dozens of variations on both communism and socialism based on the different ways these ideologies are implemented in different countries. There's Stalinism, Leninism, Trotskyism, Maoism, and others which are essentially all versions of Marxism, coupled with various styles of revolution. Karl Marx was an economist and philosopher who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto, among other foundational books on communism. In short, his theory centered around the idea that as Europe transitioned from centralized monarchies to quasi-democratic capitalist economies, workers were being exploited by those who owned the means of production. So if you work in a factory or on a farm, as many at the time did, whoever owns the factory or farm is getting more out of the worker than they're putting in. This creates an inherent inequality. giving the owners, who Marx called the bourgeoisie, power over the workers, called the proletariat. In Marxism, to fix this inequality, society must shift towards a model where the proletariat hold this power instead, by collectively controlling the means of production. That's where socialism and communism come into play. According to Marx, socialism is a precursor to communism and the next logical step after capitalism. In socialism, a democratic state controls the means of production, rather than having private companies hold ownership. Instead of competing with each other as in a capitalist society, socialism has workers contribute as much as they can to the greater good, and then they all share equally in that good. Variations of this idea are already popular within capitalist societies in the form of universal healthcare or social services like fire departments and schools funded by taxes. While the use of these services is unequal, everyone is equally responsible for contributing to them based on their ability or level of income. So that's socialism. But once the state controls all the means of production, the next step is total collective ownership, not just of production, but all aspects of society and economy, including private property. The intention of abolishing private property is a classless, moneyless, and stateless society, where everyone works towards the same collective goal of being healthy, happy, and free. Everybody does what they can to contribute and takes only what they need in return. As I said before, there are no true communist countries, and there never have been. Every so-called communist country is actually a socialist country, with the state controlling employment and economy to some degree. Even the widely referred to Communist Russia was actually called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. In short, socialism and communism are not altogether different. Rather, most schools of economics consider socialism to be a precursor to communism once the state has enough control over society and economy. But this total control is a major reason that socialist countries struggle to reach this ideal. Corruption is rampant in countries like the former USSR, Venezuela, Vietnam, and North Korea, largely due to people in power abusing that power instead of using it to help the society they control, and refusing to give up that power to the people. Nonetheless, socialist ideals have seen incredible success when paired with capitalism in countries like Sweden and Canada. The human hurdle of overcoming power and greed in government is the biggest reason we've never seen a true communist country. So, which countries have been labeled communist, and how do they actually live up to their reputations? Find out in this video to the right. Thanks for watching Now This World. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this every week.
Hold your comments.
Capitalism versus socialism. We can sum up each economic system in one line. Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right? No, wrong, so wrong. It's exactly backwards. And I'll prove it to you. Been on Amazon lately? Each of the thousands of products Amazon offers represents the work of people who believe they have something you want or need. If they're right, they prosper. If they're wrong, they don't. That's how the free market works. It encourages people to improve their lives by satisfying the needs of others. No one starts a business making a thing or providing a service for themselves. They start a business to make things or provide services for others. Now, I speak from personal experience. When I was the CEO of the company that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's restaurant chains, we spent millions of dollars every year trying to determine what customers wanted. If our customers didn't like something, we changed it, and fast. Because if we didn't, our competitors would, pun intended, eat us for lunch. The consumer, that's you, has the ultimate power. In effect, you vote with every dollar you spend. In a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power. It decides what you get from a limited supply it decides should exist. Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it. Not surprisingly, they always get it wrong. Have you ever noticed that late-stage socialist failures always run out of essential items like toilet paper? Of course, this isn't a problem for those who have the right connections with the right people. Those chosen few get whatever they want. But everyone else is out of luck. Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, is the most recent example of socialism driving a prosperous country into an economic ditch. Now, maybe you think it's an unfair example. I'm not sure why, but okay. We'll ignore the fact that leftist activists celebrated it as a great socialist success right up until it wasn't. But what about Western European countries? Don't they have socialist economies? People seem pretty happy there. Why can't we have what they have? Free healthcare, free college, stronger unions. Good question, and the answer may surprise you. There are no socialist countries in Western Europe. Most are just as capitalist as the United States. The only difference, and it's a big one, is that they offer more government benefits than the U.S. does. We can argue about the cost of these benefits and the point at which they reduce individual initiative, thus doing more harm than good. Scandinavians have been debating those questions for years. But only a free market capitalist economy can produce the wealth necessary to sustain all of the supposedly free stuff Europeans enjoy. To get the free stuff, after all, you have to create enough wealth to generate enough tax revenue to pay for everything the government gives away. Without capitalism, you're Venezuela. In a 2015 speech at Harvard, Denmark's prime minister took great pains to make this point. I know that some people in the U.S. associate the Nordic model with socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. So when you point to Denmark as a paragon of socialism, you're really singing the praises of capitalism. The more capitalism, the less socialism you need. Look at America since 2017. A policy of lower taxes and less government regulation, that's more capitalism, has led to a robust economic expansion, something thought impossible just a few years earlier. Unemployment, notably among minority groups typically most at risk for poverty, is at a generational low. Economic expansion gets people off welfare and into work. That's less socialism. None of this requires a degree in economics. Common sense is all you need. That's why it's so frustrating to see young people praising socialism and criticizing capitalism. It's bad enough that they're working against their own interests. Better job prospects, better wages, personal freedom. But they're also working against the interest of the less fortunate. Capitalism leads to economic democracy. Socialism leads to the economic dictatorship of the elite. Always and everywhere. So beware what you ask for. You just might get it. I'm Andy Puzder, the author of The Capitalist Comeback for Prager University.
Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. The United States are in a rather turbulent time politically. With the left and the right being increasingly polarized, many voices on the right are speaking up against the possibility that communism could rise in the U.S. Many see this as an extreme and unrealistic overreaction to the ideas being put forth by the far left, but it is certainly interesting to think about. So let's explore the situation and answer the question, what if America was communist? To some, this sounds like a fairy tale. Others believe that this is the direction in which the country is moving, led by the radical left. And it's true that the left is engaging in certain things that could be considered signs of a communist revolution, with many Marxist sentiments on the rise. For example, some claim that cultural Marxism has become rather prevalent on the left. This refers to bringing about changes in attitudes in schools, government, and media to open the gates to other Marxist policies. And this argument does have its merits. Many far-left movements have taken to turning aspects of life into those with power versus those without power, similar to the proletariats and bourgeoisie of Marxism. However, a number of people disagree with this assessment, claiming that they are merely trying to achieve equity or social justice. They think that those accusing the left of cultural Marxism are doing the same thing the Nazis did when accusing the Jewish people of spreading communism in Germany. Either way, the fear of the rise of communism remains. What's so scary about communism? Well, it generally just doesn't work and leads to economic collapse and often serious violations committed on the people. It's often argued that this is because the idea of communism goes against against human nature. People generally aren't interested in doing things for others without a reward, and this often leads to substandard conditions in communist countries. Eventually, it tends to devolve into a few greedy people taking advantage of others. Sounds familiar? However, many proponents of communism claim that human nature changes to fit its environment, that if it was attempted in a country with an abundance of resources like the US, the citizens would realize the abundance and be content. These people point to other areas where humans denied their selfish nature, such as labor laws and the abolishment of slavery. We've moved past survival of the fittest in some areas, moving instead to help those in need. However, it's one thing to change a policy in the name of helping others. It's very different to change an entire country, or perhaps an entire world. Unfortunately, many believe that if America became communistic and the rest of the world didn't, things would not go well. This decision would not only have implications within the US, but for other countries as well. America is a global economic powerhouse, essentially the king of capitalism. A sudden conversion from a capitalist economy to a socialist system would have a huge impact on the global economy. If the other countries refused to shift, there's a good chance that the world economy would suffer greatly, or else the US would lose a great deal of influence. For this reason, many believe that for the US to successfully shift to communism, the rest of the world would need to convert as well. This could be achieved in a few ways. The US could reach out and attempt to convince other countries to transition as well. This would be difficult since communism is deemed unrealistic by most countries. Another option, however, is one that has been attempted several times over the years: conversion by force. Countries like the Soviet Union and China have attempted to spread communism in the past, often using force to bring about change. The US could attempt to spread their communism in this way, bringing about a third world war. Depending on which countries went along with the ideological change peacefully, this could go either way, but as is true of most wars, it would be a terrible thing for the world. The fact remains, however, that pretty much every example of communism we've seen has gone rather poorly. Mass starvation was quite common in these countries. In Mao's China, as many as 45 million people died of famine between 1958 and 1962. It's even led to some highly immoral acts in communist countries, with significant communist nations like the Soviet Union and China slaughtering millions of innocent people under communist regimes. Communism essentially requires a group of people to have incredible amounts of power, which tends to lead to the abuse of said power. It is possible that the US would come upon many of these problems as well, although on the other hand, the vast abundance of resources in the US could help to make communism possible. However, let's imagine that the US converted to communism and the world followed suit. How might life look in the US? Well, there's a good chance that many of those currently advancing arguably Marxist policies would be in for a rude awakening. It's unlikely that the utopia of equality many picture in their ideal world would come to pass. Many of those who are most involved in the spread of far-left policies tend to be rather well off. These people may be disappointed when their station is decreased in a communist society, particularly if wealth was distributed globally. Many of the poorest people in America today are still doing far better than many people in Haiti. So this could be good news for Haiti, but not so much for the US of A. And now we return to our question: what if America was communist? Well, it would not be easy. Due to its history, the US is one of the least likely countries to adopt communism. And even without the history of anti-communist propaganda, communism's lack of success in other countries makes it rather unappealing. But if for some reason the US did become communist, its abundance of resources could help it to be the first successful communist country. On the other hand, it could be the end of the United States as we know it, if the lack of drive to succeed caused a weakening and crumbling of the economy. And if wealth was distributed globally, the people of the United States and many Western countries would be in for a rude reminder of just how well off they have been. Thank you for watching Life's Biggest Questions. I hope this was interesting and informative, and maybe even inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you like this video, please thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below. While you're down there, let me
Just one more.
You know, I've gotten a lot of questions and comments on Twitter in the last 2 or 3 weeks with all the government stuff going on and Obamacare launching and all of those kinds of things of, you know, that I'm pretty much a capitalist pig. I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism. And people are always, they don't understand why. Because, Dave, you're for the little guy. Dave, you're out there, you're a consumer advocate. You're the one that protects the people who've gotten beat up and beat down. And so why would you be for capitalism? Because I'm a pragmatist. I'm practical. I believe in things that work. That's what a pragmatist is. And if you're too much of a pragmatist, you can do things that work even if they're not moral. And so we don't want to go that far, obviously. And capitalism can take the form of immoral, meaning where people, in their freedom, use it to mistreat people rather than use their freedoms to help people. But let me help you with this, folks. The United States of America is the largest group of wealthy people ever in the history of the world. The largest group of wealthy people ever in the history of the world. Here's some statistics for you. If you make household income of $34,000, you're in the top 1% of income earners in the world. If you make $11,000 a year, which puts you substantially below the poverty line, you're in the top 14% of people in the world income-wise. This is the largest group, and you're one of them if you're listening to me. The largest group of wealthy people. See, we think wealthy people are millionaires, but no. If you make $34,000 a year household income, you're in the top 1% of income earners in the world. Now, why is it that the United States of America, in spite of all of our warts and our flaws, has reached that point? Was it just luck? Was it random? No. It's a broke. We had nothing. I became a millionaire by the time I was 26 years old. I was so stupid I lost everything. I had to do it twice. Some of you only have to do it once. I talked to a guy the other day that had several $1 million in his mutual funds. He was 70 years old. He never made over $70,000 in his lifetime. But he invested and saved in mutual funds every single month. He was a plumber. Capitalism gives the little man the best shot at not only survival, but at prosperity in the history of the world. No time can you find where communism has done that, where the government provides everything and evens everything out and everyone gets an economic trophy. Everyone's the same. We all have the same clothes. We all have the same cars. We all have the same jobs, and the government is the owner. That's communism. And one step in between that and capitalism is called socialism, where the government provides you a lot of things, too many things that it can't afford to do. So capitalism is far superior for you and for me. So that's why I prefer capitalism. If you don't believe me, visit several of the wonderful countries we call romantic in Europe and look at their economic systems and look at how the people are doing. It's not really very romantic, honestly. Pretty much sucks. This is The Dave Ramsey Show.
Here's my experience. When I was a late teen, I was an educated person. I mean, I kept up with current events and the world system. And at that time, the Soviet Union and East Germany were continually boasting about how their economy was producing and how they were able to take care of the poor through socialism. And of course, the leaders of the socialist countries at that time, Soviet Union, East Germany in particular, but there were many more, always gave the glory for these things, not to the system, but rather to whoever was leading the system. Stalin, Hitler, and in Asia, Pol Pot and Ho Chi Minh and Chairman Mao were like icons in their country, and the propagandists were trying to set them up as gods. Some, like in North Korea, became gods through stringing together a generation of people from the same family. I had an opportunity to go to a communist country then. I got a scholarship to go to Europe in a student orchestra. And we traveled through 15, 16 different countries. But the treat of the whole thing was supposed to be going through Checkpoint Charlie, which was the gateway between East Berlin, which was communist, and West Berlin, which was democratic. So going through that gate, taking 17 hours in the middle of that to have every bit of luggage checked, everything, that we had on our person and interviews with everybody there. Finally, we got through to East Berlin. And because I was informed and I listened to the propaganda, I was expecting something of a utopia there, where the poor people had their chance, and what they had was doled out by the government. And look, I didn't even have enough money to buy a decent guitar amp. So I'm thinking, well, maybe this is the system we need. But when I got in there, everything was stark and gray. The buildings of Berlin, some were still in the same condition as they were after the Second World War. Gray, it's as though there was no color in anything. And even the sites that had been so prevalent before the war for you to go visit, they were run down and they just weren't working. And so I had an opportunity to meet kids there my own age, 17, 18 years old, on the streets. They're very afraid to even come out, and their whole reason for coming out was to try to exchange currency, and their willingness to give X number of marks for an American dollar, because the American dollar could buy something, whereas their marks couldn't. The government was supplying everything they supposedly needed. But it looked to me, with these kids in the middle of a German capital, they didn't have anything. Their clothes were all torn up. They were dirty. It's like they lived on the streets, but they didn't live on the streets. This is the way their homes were. And so we did then go into Czechoslovakia, to Prague, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I saw more of the same, except for one difference. On the street corners were still guard towers that held machine gunners to keep the people's dissatisfaction from turning into riotous action. And the young kids were still doing the same thing, trying to change their money for ours. And we were put up in the Communist International Hotel in Prague. And I was told that, oh, there might be bugs in the room. So I looked, and sure enough, there was a little hole in the wall. And flashing my flashlight in there, you could see the electronic device. Every room was hooked up with an electronic device. The rest of the kids that were there, they all found the same thing. What I did, I could have got in big trouble, is I poured water in there and stuffed it full of Kleenex. Not that I thought they were going to hear anything from me, but just simply because I didn't like the whole idea. We were watched every minute by soldiers and guards. And even coming into Czechoslovakia, I was asleep in the back of the bus, and I was abruptly awakened by the slap of the face. And when I opened my eyes, here was a Czech soldier standing over me, demanding from me in Czech, which I didn't understand, my passport and my papers. And he had gone through the rest of the bus and gotten them from everybody, but I was asleep. And to wake up to that and thinking, why, this would never happen in the United States with all these people looking on, I was dismayed. And when I came back, that was the end of my flirtation with socialism. Because as one of those commentators said, socialism, to take the next step, is communism. From where the workers own everything, supposedly, to where the government owns everything. In this country, we have a lot of socialism now. As was expressed, our Social Security system, our health care under Obamacare was completely socialized. And the one spokesman, the spokesman for Bernie, Belen, she said under Trump, 45 million people lost their insurance. Well, that was because of Obamacare. And, you know, we've had nothing but complaints about that ever since. I myself am financed in great measure by the socialist system of Social Security. It's necessary. I put into that system my whole life. I ought to be able to get something out. But then again, doing the numbers, crunching the numbers, you'll find that most people can live to the age of 240 years and never get in what they put out. And the Social Security system is bankrupt anyway, which it was a system that the funds are supposed to be held in perpetuity, but they weren't. This is because government leaders, in their greed, took from the poor to finance their own programs of whatever they happen to be. And look at some of our politicians today. They're making huge amounts of money from communist countries like China and Ukraine, which is a member of the former Soviet Union. You see one in particular, Biden and his family. They have collected billions of dollars here from these countries. And we know about the Clintons and this Russian collusion and so forth. The very sins of these certain people, they are trying to put on other people who are innocent to deflect from their own corruption and greed of the past. Now, we need to get into these things, and these people need to be punished. I don't even need to tell you who. But the thing that has been not so surprising, but upsetting to me, is to hear the contenders for the presidency talking about socialism and all the wonderful benefits a person is going to get from that. And that could be true, except, as was said before, the characteristic of socialism that is always in question is who is leading it? Who is the government? Communism, one step away from socialism, when the government takes complete control after the people fail. Do you want those people to be taking the reins of the government in a socialist state? But that's what they claim. Everyone on the side of one party are claiming socialism as their ground, and even democratic socialism, as you heard Bernie say. But you remember what the name of the Nazi Party was? They called it the National Socialist Party. And we who've lived a little bit know about the 5 and 10-year plans of the Soviet Union, and that those plans were utter failures. I remember that there was a crop failure in the Soviet Union, that United States chipped in and gave millions and millions of tons of wheat over there just to stave off the starvation of the 70s. And some 42 million people died in that system of starvation over that 10 years. Same with China. It's worse there. China is cracking down more and more, especially on the churches right now. There's a state China Christian church called the Three Self Movement. And now my brother tells me, who's been working in China for years, that the state is even cracking down on its own and bringing ministers in and people and putting them in prison and causing home groups to be, people in the home groups to be arrested and their houses burned on account of this. So that's my experience, and I want to leave it there and hear what your opinion is about especially the rise of communism in America. And if you can't come up with anything, I've got a few clues to help you out. Who's first? Wait 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Nobody?
All right, I'll start. Yeah.
I knew you would.
Well, I've lived through 20 years of this. As a matter of fact, I remember the grain issue in which we had to dispense grain to Russia to keep that massive starvation somewhat at bay. And you gave a number. What was that number again? It was a very accurate number because I remember 42 million.
42 million. That's what they said on that on one of those videos.
I thought the number was higher for whatever reason. But the fact of the matter is, those of us who are in their late 40s, early to mid 50s and 60s, we remember this stuff. We remember watching the day Tiananmen Square, the issues of Tiananmen Square. We remember the day that the wall fell down, separating East and West Germany. We remember Leonid Brezhnev. We remember Yuri Andropov, Andrei Gromyko, and these people were not nice people. Okay, we remember Fidel Castro. We remember, who was that guy? Helmut, was it Schmidt or Kohl? Was the president of East Germany?
Both of them.
When we were growing up. But we remember the issues. I got an opportunity to go to Romania and compete in a wrestling tournament in Romania. And the tournament was held inside the place where the communist government during those times, they held their meetings, okay? And so it was a big deal to go inside of there, and you know about everything that happened with Romania. And this was just after the Ceausescu regime was overthrown. So to be able to go there in 91, 92, and to participate in this type of stuff, it was something. And just like you said, you're right. The buildings are dark, gray, and dreary. The things are broken down. And these were once upon a time, before pre-World War II, that those countries were very beautiful countries. But when communism gets their hands on things, they literally choke the life out of them. That's no joke, folks. I've been to South Korea, where you can go and you can look over into North Korea, and you can see the stark difference between South Korea and North Korea. Hearing what you're hearing today coming out of North Korea, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. So, you know, I've gotten the opportunity to go to Budapest, Hungary. You know what happened in 1956?
Yes.
And Hungary. Mm-hmm. And when they took over those lands, they literally choked, burned, and crushed the life out of these places. So when I hear, and what really upsets me is when I hear African Americans champion socialism, champion communism, and you know, we go through enough as it is. And although things were not equal at times in this country, this is still the best country right now to be in the state that you are. You heard the man talk on the video. Even somebody poor like you, or had limited income like myself, it still in these other countries would be considered wealthy. Don't forget that. And African Americans and young people, young of both groups, who do not know the civil rights struggle, who do not know the American struggle, and a lot of this is because they have stopped teaching history in the schools. These young people do not know history. They don't remember the back and forth. They remember the Russian and U.S. hockey game in 1980. They don't remember those things. They don't know about those things because in some way, shape, or form, we failed our young people. And this is why they're coming out of college with debt. This is why they're having to do a lot of the stuff that they're doing now, because we didn't properly educate them when they went into college. Some of them needed to go to trade school rather than to go to college.
Right.
You know, so that's my experience with viewing communism by going and being a part of situations that will allow me to visit different countries. So we are blessed, and we need to remember that.
You have been all over the place. If you got into Romania at that time, that's astounding. You remember what they did to Ceausescu?
Oh yes, they shot him to death. They cussed him out, and you can go and find the video, and you could hear the cursing. And you know what? Him and his old lady, they didn't go out like no whatchamacallit. they was cussing and carrying on back. But in the middle of the exchange, you hear the pop, 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 pop. And that's how they killed Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife. So yeah, I got a chance to go in there. It was I got another opportunity to go into a communist country to study their criminal justice system, but I didn't go. It was a summer program, and I was going to be there all that summer. And I was not necessarily comfortable at the time, even then, with going to a communist country and staying for an extended period of time. Usually I would go in there and I'd be in there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even a month. But I would have been in there for a while. I would have been there for a couple of months, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. So, you know, I've gotten an opportunity to go a lot of places. I mean, even that somebody talked about Scandinavia. I've been to Scandinavia on more than one occasion. Okay. And while they say that it is a market economy, I would still venture to say that it's a socialist economy. So
to a greater extent than here, yes.
Exactly. So there are my thoughts on it.
Thank you. Very good thoughts. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Okay.
Just the history of these things, how they don't work, should say enough about why we should not completely embrace them. We already have, as the video said, there are many socialist things that are part of our system right now. It's probably enough that it is that way. We shouldn't go totally one way or totally communist or anything like that, because one of the videos pointed out it's not going to really work. It's not going to work at all. You know, we don't have the technology for something like that to even possibly work. And even if you did, you know, who would control it? That's all about control. You get, you know, small group of people controlling a large group of people and all the resources. Of course, you've got Stalinism, Leninism, Trotskyism, you know, whatever those are. You know, put anybody's name on it you want. They're the leader, and it doesn't work.
How about Warrenism? Wouldn't you feel pretty good if we had a socialist or communist country and Elizabeth Warren was running it? You know, she's got a real good heart, and she's very meek and mild. Well, that's what scares me. Go ahead.
The thing about the heart, that Jeremiah 17:9, however you know, at least in the Masoretic, it says it's deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? So the intentions of people, you know, they might be acting. A lot of people act. Then when they get in power, you find out that is not at all what they have in mind.
Right. Let's think about religion and socialism right now for a moment. And I'm thinking here in the United States and the election coming up next year. And I'm thinking about the Democrat Party and their social principles and their what they claim as personal religion. Do you know anything about that? Are these candidates people of faith? or are they climbing the hill? King of the hill. Go ahead, Desmond.
I was going to say that, you know, it does say to give to the poor and needy. And, you know, it seems like this idea of socialism, it must have arose somewhere from that, because if you didn't have that kind of moral fortitude, why would you give to anyone that wasn't your own type deal? And then we see in Mark where it says the poor will always be among you, and it's coming from, I think, Deuteronomy like 11 or maybe 15 or something like that, where it says they'll never cease to be poor among you, and he commands us to open our hands to our brothers and the poor and the needy. So it seems like this idea, it definitely comes from Yahweh, and it comes from his instructions. But when it says that type of thing in Deuteronomy 15, it's 15:11, I just pulled it up, and it says to the poor and needy, to your brother, and to the poor and needy in your land. Well, what is your land? I mean, of course, when he's talking then, you could assume it's the people of the land of Israel, if they're poor and needy there. But if we look at ourselves, is our land right now, is it our country? Is it our state? Is it our city? Is it the entire world? And I think that's a question we should look at. What is our land?
The only thing that we could hope for in a socialist United States is that the people who were elected and are on top would have what the one commentator said, a Judeo-Christian background. And I think that those people, at least from their public appearances, that whole attitude is very much lacking. They promise and promise, but they don't seem to have it in their heart, especially in these political speeches lately. It seems more like hatred.
It is total hatred. And to answer your question, Desmond, it starts at home. And I've always been taught that charity starts at home. It starts in your home. It starts in your city. It starts in your state, and then it goes to your nation. That's what it says. Your land. It's where you are. For the people that was being written to at the time, it says when you go into the land of Israel. But remember, we've been kicked out. We've been dispersed. So where is our land now? Jeremiah tells you. He tells you to do good in the land in which you have been driven. So the land is, yes, your house, your city, your state, and your nation, if you're able. But if you're not able, it starts out your house, your city, and the people that you run into.
Man, why do you think the poor are so drawn to this idea? Especially, yeah.
Okay,
please.
well, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, in the book, The Coming of the...
Raise your voice, raise your volume a little bit more.
Okay, hold on. I'm on Bluetooth, so
No, you're good, Sandra. You're good.
Okay, so in the book, The Coming of the New Deal, it talks about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is basically a communist manifesto of how to take over the world. It sounds like a pinky in the brain thing, but it's not. But the protocols of the Elders of Zion came out of Bolshevik revolution, and they were smuggled into Germany. And they believe that that's one of the things that Hitler studied to get his mad plan. But one of the things that they suggested that I found very interesting was that they said that when basically what it did was it created corporate America. And the thing that it did to our society was it changed the church and their attitude from how can we help you to what can you do for us. And we see a lot of that nowadays. Everybody wants to know what the other guy can do for them, but not necessarily how you can help the other guy.
For sure.
It was suggested that the great crash of the 20s was the spiritual ramifications of the protocols of the elders of Zion and the concept of corporatism in America. And that's why we had the big crash. So it's definitely something to pay attention to. I know that now that the protocols of the elders of Zion, I studied them, I don't know, 30 years ago. Now they're like, oh no, that's the Jews and they're out to get everybody. But I don't honestly believe that that's where it came from. So
Right.
we can't change other people, but until we create a community asking how we can help others, we're just not going to prosper. And something else that needs to be pointed out, and this was my main contention with the church when I was in the church, was, everybody's supposed to be prosperous, but Yahweh says, I give to each according to their lot. And don't ask me where that's at in the Bible. It's somewhere in the New Testament. But, that has a great bearing. And I honestly believe that for our lot to change, we have to walk in obedience. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I wanted to throw something in about Jackson's last question about the leaders and the socialism thing. And I think that whereas some may come from a good heart and moral perspective, trying to do what God wants or trying to do what the Father wants, Yahweh. But some of them, I think, are just trying to get votes. And they know that they'll get more votes from people if they give them stuff than if they don't give them stuff. So he says he puts over the rulers are the lowest of men, he puts over us. So I would tend towards the latter argument there of trying to get votes than it is for some kind of selfless giving type idea.
Yeah, have you noticed how it seems like they want to give something and then the next time they're up, somebody one-ups them, and then they want to give more, and now to illegal aliens, they want to give not even citizenship, they want to give them ID cards and driver's licenses, and to felons and everybody else. All these people are trying to appeal to everybody, and each one of these candidates wants to give more and more stuff that they can't possibly give and they will never have. And you're right. I don't think it's out of an attitude of Judeo-Christian ethics. I think it's, like you said, it's out of the ethics of getting popular enough to get a high office for prestige, power, and a greater share. Exactly. But poor people that are posed with the communist ideas, usually by rabble-rousers, they flock to this because they don't have anything and they're ignorant. And yes, these ideas are very attractive to me personally. Yes, I'd like to have these things, definitely. But when it comes right down to it, the promises are never fulfilled, and they never can be unless you have rulers that are completely sold out to the principles of the scripture. That would work, and it probably will work in the millennium such situation, but it is never going to work in this world. It never has. Another thing about the Scandinavian countries that they always put up as socialist utopias, these are not socialist. They are free market economies, but as that commentator said, they give more to the people and they take more from the people that can give in order to do that. Now, why is it that these rich people are touting socialism when they know that it means 70, 80% tax rate, etc.? Why? Because they're again playing on the ignorance of the people. Anybody else? We got time for one more.
Well, Jackson, here's the thing, and I don't know who was speaking. They were saying, why why are they promising all this? Okay, so here's the bottom line. In the book, The Idols for Destruction, he talks about debt or wealth redistribution. The wealthy cannot get rich if we are wealthy. They can only get rich if we're in debt. By creating more debt, they load their balance sheet to the positive. So they're going to offer all this stuff up. They're going to get the votes because the newer generations want the free stuff. What that's going to do is put us farther into debt and load their balance sheets. So that's it.
That's why Dave Ramsey says, or tries to help people get out of debt, because it was so easy to get in. I was in that trap. I got out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I have a question.
The only way to do it is to do what Dave Ramsey says, get out of debt, and then you can load your balance sheet instead of theirs. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sandra.
I have a question about weighty matters. Is it more of a weighty matter that if you're in debt to pay back to those you owe, or to give to those in need even if you owe?
You said you're wondering if, I'm sorry.
If you're in debt, you have nothing to give.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that was kind of my question, is that if you're in debt, then, you know, what comes first, paying off the debt that you owe to people that you've borrowed, or helping the needy, even though you still owe stuff to other people? And if the United States is in debt, like up to their eyeballs, I mean, how can, it's just the idea of what's weightier, paying off your debt first and then helping the needy, or helping the needy and then paying off your debt?
It's a matter of balancing. This is another thing Ramsey teaches about. He never says to quit giving, but you give according to your means. And I would say probably if you don't have it, you should hold up on your giving until you can. Part of the reason you can't is because you're in debt or you're cash poor, as most of us are. Yes, I have some of his stuff as well. It's good. It's good. Some of us would consider it impossible to get out of debt because of, well, we're so deep in, or our cash flow is so low.
How about the idea of taking debt to give to the needy? Like, you don't have any money, but you can go get a loan and give it to someone who needs money. Would it be right to take on debt for the needy?
No.
It'd be better to pay their bill for them then.
Yeah. We have to do what Yahweh says, but she's right. To pass cash out is probably not the best idea. I've been taken on that so many times. I could tell you stories. And Desmond, you and I have already kind of talked about this before. But you've got to listen to the Father in that. You've also got to be practical and think critically. All right, it's time for us to go now. And I thank you for attending. And I hope you enjoyed that presentation and you're a little more informed about some of these things, especially about history of the past, and that we don't want to repeat a future of Soviet or communist or even socialist type economies. And so maybe we'll continue on next week. Thank you again. Yahweh be with you.